Man, it has been a great week. We have been busy. All of my regulars, we had the after service this weekend.
Yes.
It was a hit. We had a
Yes.
really good time. For those
I'm
you don't
still
know,
recovering.
me too. I ain't gonna lie. I feel like Monday I didn't do nothing but sleep, and then
Mhm.
like when I got up, it was like, yeah, I need to sleep again. Like
Yeah.
it was one
Yeah.
of them days. But we had a really awesome weekend. We asked that you be in prayer for us. It's time for us to kind of start exploring other opportunities in a way to put this in another venue.
Yeah.
So be prayerful for that for us for sure. We want to definitely continue to do it the way God is calling us to do it.
Yes. And those of you that didn't make it to the event, I mentioned about doing women's ministry, like reaching to the single moms and younger women generation. Let's figure out something that we can do. Let's be an impact and give what we got. We may not have a lot, but what we got to give, we can definitely put it together and make something happen. So, if any of you guys have any ideas, some and a direction to go into, talk to me. Let's start exploring it because I want to make something happen this year. This year. Let's not wait till next year to do something. Let's make something with the time that we have now.
100%. So
Absolutely. Amen.
I know that it every week, we are blessed that God gives us an awesome opportunity to kind of share and talk about subjects and topics, excuse me, that matter to us. Today, we have a really cool opportunity. I wish that the camera started rolling an hour ago because I'm not even gonna lie to you.
Yeah.
As y'all can see, I already got my cotton ready, my little tissue ready because I done already prepped my eyes. They watered, they ready, like they just ready because it's been one of those type of heavies. But I really believe that in this season, grief is a heavy, right? And depending on what you're grieving, some people are grieving the loss of loved ones. Some people are grieving the loss of people who are still alive. Some people grieve friends, jobs. Like we all grieve different things.
Yeah.
And this person that we have on the couch today, man, I have had the privilege of watching her live out her grief. And it has been phenomenal, motivational for me. It's kind of crazy because we from the same town. She went to
Right.
school. She went to school with my brother. But like I began to become aware of her story by way of social media. And I just followed her for a while. I think it's been a few years now, right?
Right.
Followed her for a few years and just watched the content as it encouraged, as it um, um, gave you like just things to pay attention to, be aware of,
Perspective.
but perspective exactly. And I was like, okay, God, like I'm gonna just reach out to her. Like I literally sent her a message. I literally sent her a message in Facebook and said, "How would you feel about doing?" And we have been talking back and forth probably for about the last 3 weeks, just kind of getting this all kind of hashed out.
Right.
You're going to get to know her story, but you're also going to get to know her testimony because I can tell you my story and you can feel bad for me. I can tell you my testimony and you can find God and see God through me.
Mm-hmm.
And so today we're going to talk about grief,
Yeah.
God, and grit. Rebuilding after the unthinkable. Grief, God, and grit. Now I'm going to tell y'all, I'm going to try my best to do very minimal talking and let her kind of handle it all. But I also want you to understand that don't y'all be doing those screen grabs or screenshots if I start crying a little bit because it was real in here, okay? All right, so first of all, let me give you an opportunity to kind of introduce yourself to them.
Okay. So Courtney Foster, and well, thank you for the introduction. Thank
Yeah.
y'all for having me here. Courtney Foster, born and raised, same town, Port Arthur, Texas. I am widowed of 3.5 years with 3 young children, 7, 6, and 4. So I'm financial services industry, and we're finding a new way to do an old thing.
That's it. I like that. Finding a new way to do an old thing.
Yeah.
Finding a new way to do an old thing. So we're going to just dive in. I mean, this conversation go anyway. I ain't going to lie to you. I got a list of questions, but I've learned in the last hour that this conversation could go anywhere. But let's just roll into it, okay? How did your faith shift? Wait. Give them some context as to the loss of your husband.
Okay.
You ain't got to go in as deep as you went with us earlier,
Okay.
but just kind of set the groundwork so that as we unfold the rest of these questions, they kind of can follow along.
Okay, fair deal. So I am, again, widowed 3.5 years, and I am widowed by suicide. So mental health, advocacy, and all of those things that kind of transitioned, it kind of morphed into a part of my purpose now. So just grief is one thing, loss is another thing, but there's some intricate pieces within suicide death that a lot of people don't understand that.
So, with that being said, how did your faith shift after losing your husband?
I believe that my faith had to break down. Like, I had to completely rebuild it. It was non-existent. I can remember in the beginning, especially the first 3 months, the only prayer that I could pray in the beginning was, God, make it plain. God, make it plain, because I couldn't utter a thank you. I couldn't utter a I'm grateful for these challenges. I couldn't utter a I understand, because I didn't understand any of that. So it was, God, make it plain. What came from that, I was still kicking and screaming, like, okay, if you did make it plain, I don't even know what that means, but that's all I got for you right now.
Because it's almost like you've been tested in your faith in other areas of your life.
Right.
But never in this area.
Right.
And never this heavy.
Right.
So it's almost like you gotta find that faith from somewhere else.
Right.
It's gotta rebirth from something else.
Right. And it was also very different experience. And when I experienced my mom's death in 2010, I thought I had experienced the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
And then I lost my husband.
Your spouse.
Which, you know, that's where two become one.
Yeah.
You know, so it was a part of me that had to die, and that forcefully died. And I had to figure that part of it out. So it was just a rebuild, but it was a rebuild from the ground up, like a whole new foundation. It's growing up in church. You know, we're taught we're supposed to move a certain way. We're not supposed to question God. We're not supposed to do but what happens when those things do happen?
Right.
So it was a learning God for myself in the space that I was in, not what I was told based on religion.
And you know, it's funny you say that, because like grief is such a tricky kind of thing, right? Because how we approach it really determines whether if we elevate it or if we, like, I don't want to say demoted, but if we if we go down into the pit of it, right? And knowing what I know, right? And just in the discussion, the brief aspect of the discussion that we've had, right? And watching what I saw you do on social, right? Faith had to be a very vital part of putting yourself back together, but then still being able to grab hold of some sense of purpose, right? I went from being a wife and a mother to just a mother. I went from doing this as a partner and having partnership to really kind of almost as if I'm a one-man band, right? And in that, you know, we hear this term used a lot. I'm a single parent, right? But like a single parent, but with nobody to pick up the phone and call and say when, right? So my relationship, my conversation, my intimacy with God definitely has to go up probably another level, right? Because my faith is definitely being challenged.
Right. And when I think of, you know, like I said, I had to start from the ground up again. I think of it as a tree. You know, you got your roots, you got your trunk, and then you got your branches. So for me, after starting to rebuild that faith, my faith and my relationship with God became the water that I needed to rebuild that tree. You know, because sometimes trees are rotten. Trees, you got to cut them down. You got to prune. You got to, you know, when you're gardening, you got to prune and all those things. So my faith became the water that I needed to, you know what I'm saying, to continue to grow. But when it comes to like the term single parenting, that's still a tricky subject for me. It's kind of like one of those pressure points, because it's like, I'm not a single parent, I'm a solo parent. But I understand when people say that, because a single is a one, you know, and I am one. So it's finding in that growth in my faith, I had to find the back seat to taking offense to certain things based on the way people approached you know, my situation. 100%. So definitely.
And I guess I'm asking this question, right, in a probably in the form of a statement, but also kind of having to lean not in a new partner, but lean more heavier on my current partner, right, which is God, right? Like it's like it becomes heavy, because I think healing while still having to be present enough for your children to heal, right, is a full-time job, right? It's a full-time gig, 100%. Right. Let me ask you a question. What's one thing people don't talk about when it comes to grief in church?
That there are no rules. There are no rules. You know, we look at the rules and the byproduct of this is what you're supposed to do, this is what you're not supposed to do, but nobody has there's no playbook for this. I had to write the playbook, you know, in I had to, you know, I got the book, but God is the author of this playbook, and I had to run the play that he's writing. And when I'm running that play, there's a big difference that, you know, some of the church don't understand, is there's a difference between isolation and solitude.
Come on.
And so in isolation, that's where the enemy can play on your mind. That's when the enemy can play on, you're not good enough. You know, you don't have what it takes to get through what you're going through. But in solitude, I can be in my bubble with my babies, and I know that God, again, that water, you know, he's watering that tree. And that's the difference between isolation and solitude. And when you know the play that God is running for you, there's no church as far as the walls that can deter you from that. But that takes a relationship with God. Right. And so when I was able to rebuild that, but what I did to kind of combat those things is, in my current church, I led a small group. Yeah. So I led a small group. I co-led one with roller skating, two semesters, and then I moved into the widow sector, and I led my first widows group. And you know, it's a lot of things that people don't understand, but it's like there's no rules. There's no.
So, and I guess it sounds almost like, right, like, you ever heard the term, I desire to have relationship over religion? Mm-hmm. Like you really got to get to the point where it's a relationship, because like you said, you know, even in healing from grief or dealing with loss, right? What God calls me to do might be a little different than what God called you to do, right? And so it doesn't always look the same.
I was going to piggyback off what she said.
Go ahead.
I like that you led the group because you knew what it took. Mm-hmm. You know what it was going to take to heal. So you didn't just, when God delivered, you just didn't sit with the deliverance. So like, I got it. Mm-hmm. You gave it to the next people, the next person, because that's a hard thing. Yeah. It's hard because in order for me to give it back, it's got to be in front of me. Mm-hmm. And I got to be able to tell you and show you the emotion and give you everything I had. Right. So that I can give you the strength and the knowledge and the wisdom and the understanding that God has given me.
Come on, you preaching now, Miss Vanessa.
I'm telling
But, you know, one of the things about that is, you know, in teaching, and that's not just small groups, that's like with anything that we go through. Mm-hmm. We can't teach what we don't know, and we can't lead where we don't go. No. Mm-hmm. So it's like I can't teach this if I haven't experienced it. And then it opens me up to the fact of anytime I'm considering information from somebody, or I'm considering, hey, you should go about your life this way, or you should move like this with the kids, I consider the source. Because it's
like I can't take that from nobody that don't have no kids. Yeah. You ain't never been here. You ain't experienced what I've experienced. You're going to tell me how to raise 12 kids, but you don't even have one.
Yeah, you got to always consider the source.
Yeah. So. But that's good. I'm glad you just didn't receive and not give back. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like God don't sleep
Right.
on what we go through, right?
Right.
But there's some people that need what we got.
Amen.
And in order for me to give you what I got, sometimes I gotta take them licks.
Right.
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 And I think the other thing too, and I have found myself using this a lot of times in a lot of other discussions that I've been having, is learning to know the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Because knowledge is untested information,
Mm-hmm.
and wisdom is information that's been tested,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so it's people out there who are full of information.
Mm-hmm.
If you've ever raised kids, they get 13, 14, 15 years old.
They know everything.
Oh my
And they
God.
don't even realize it's information. It ain't wisdom, because I can tell you that's not going to work. How you know that's not going to work? Because we tried that before and it didn't work, right?
And then wisdom breeds discernment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. All right, guys, you know we do an A, B, and a C. All right. So here's the question. And in your chat, you just put in A, B, or C. Here's the question. What's one thing people don't, it's a repeat of the question. What is one thing people don't talk about when it comes to grief and faith communities? Here it is. A, the feeling of isolation and being misunderstood. B, the difficulty of finding space to grieve openly. Or C, the need for practical support alongside emotional and spiritual care. Let me read it twice. A, the feeling of isolation and being misunderstood. B, the difficulty of finding space to grieve openly. And C, the need for practical support alongside emotional and spiritual care.
All three, all of above.
C.
C.
Yeah.
C.
And that's I think for me I get it's all of the above 100%, but C was a big one for me too, because I feel like no matter what I was grieving, like many of you who are some of you on this call know me, some don't, but even when I went through my own losses, family, divorce, right? Like there was this grief that I needed practical, I needed to know what to do next, right? But my emotion had me all over the place, right? Like you grieving, you sad, you hurt, right? There's all of these balls of emotion, right? But the reality is that if somebody would have just told me, if I could just have known one step to take, it had got to a place where I just needed one. I didn't need, sometimes, we go to God and we want the play-by-play. We want to know how it's going to start and how it's going to end. Man, I was in a season where I didn't need all of that. God, if you don't tell me one step to make, I'm going to sit in this longer than I need to.
Yeah.
Right? And it's going to go from grief, it's going to become deadly. It's going to become detrimental. Yeah. And so I need a next step. I need to know what to do.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Okay, so you're a suicide prevention advocate now, right?
Right.
What would you say to someone who's struggling in silence, especially, here's the caveat, especially in a faith setting?
Okay. I would say one would be 3 words. You are enough.
Come on.
You are enough. And going even further into that, you are enough. You have enough. You do enough. And God made you in his perfect image.
Yeah.
That part.
So, we are imperfect, in our human nature, but he makes no mistakes, and nothing passes through God's hands without his knowing and his authority and his approval.
Yeah.
So it's like if you are going through this, like when my mom was going through breast cancer, I could remember her. Now, she passed away at 46, but I could remember her saying, I would say, Mom, why? Do you ever ask God why? Like, why me? And she said, yeah, I used to. And now I ask, why not me? Because my pain is medicine for somebody else. And, when we get to that space and understanding that what we are going through is bigger than us, then we're more open to receive. And so as an advocate, a lot of people, even, some of my family members may feel like, oh, you overshare or you doing too much, when in the space of social media. But social media can be a beautiful thing if you use it correctly. And for me, my goal was, one, in a suicide loss, I'm going to be the one to control the narrative. because as the spouse, it was a lot on me, the guilt, the shame, the blame, the all those things. So if I can control the narrative, then I can help somebody else. So in uncovering that, my pain is medicine for somebody else. So the goal is to let the next person know that they are not alone.
And I think the thing, me and my wife have been having this discussion, and this narrative has been coming up in our discussion over weeks, right? Is that shame will keep your story hostage, and somebody will repeat what you suffered,
Right.
and not have the play or the input that they need
Right.
because of the shame.
Right.
And we don't like to say it that way sometimes. Sometimes, oh, well, no, I just think not everybody need to know my business. Yeah, but when I'm healed in that, there is I kid you not, the things that I'm healed in, every time I say it, there is a deliverance, a refresh of deliverance, even I feel as I declare it, right? And I think sometimes, if we be honest, shame is the thief. It's the robber.
Right.
We're just not honest enough sometimes with ourselves, or transparent enough with ourselves to say, I'm not ready to tell that story because I'm still embarrassed in that place.
Right. And when you mention, in the faith setting, just going back to the fact that nothing passes through God's hands without his knowing, we're in a culture that says, oh, you got to move in silence. That's the thing we say, you got to move in silence. Don't ever let your left hand know what your right hand doing.
You preaching that old people language there.
And things like that. But when we move in silence, we're not giving God glory.
No.
And so sometimes, yes, you have to control the season, because you never, in your sharing, because you never know what you may not be able to share it in chapter 1 because you never know what God gonna do in chapter 7.
Yes.
But when you are sharing, you're giving God the glory, and that makes everything point back to him.
Yes.
So that is why we go through that's why we go through suffering. We go through suffering to point it back to him. One of the reasons why we go through it. So in a faith-based setting, I think, like you said, the shame, but it's important to know that 9 times out of 10, somebody else in that room has gone through what you're going through, and now you're giving them a playbook because you went first. The first one through the wall gets bloody.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Man, I think the other thing too is sometimes we don't even realize somebody's whole world is waiting on my story.
Yeah.
Right?
Facts.
And I would hate to think that I've caused somebody to stumble or to fall into in a exact same situation I stumbled in because I didn't say it. And you said something a few minutes ago that really, it sparked a thought, but it also made me think of a conversation I was having with my dad once. And I was telling him how so many people don't understand. Old school church was, evangelism was door to door. You went and knocked on the door with them pamphlets.
Right.
You know what I mean? Hey, Jesus love you. Or you have them, my daddy had them Jesus VHSs. Hey, go watch this. It's the story of Christ, right? What they don't understand is social media gives us all of that coverage without the creepiness of knocking on your door. Right? It gives you that access, and you can listen to my story if it, but you could also scroll past my story if it's not for you.
Exactly.
And another lesson I had to learn in sharing my story was that I can share my story and still protect the characters in it.
Exactly.
Like sometimes we're scared to tell our story because we're scared who we're going to put out or to put to shame. But God has so made it to where he's like, but when you're healed in that place, they don't need a name. When you're healed in that place, they don't need context. You know what I mean? You don't have to get on here and say, my husband lost his life because da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. That's not their business. The core of it is that suicide took his life, and the story is my kids and my life continue to move on.
Exactly.
And I think when you're able to tell the story in that way, and let me throw this caveat in there, and we're not listening for the tea or the gossip, but we're really listening for the deliverance, right? Then then there is so much room for the shift and the growth to happen in that space.
God can move in that.
Yeah. All right. There is a myth. Here's the myth. There is a myth that therapy and faith can't coexist. What broke that myth for you personally?
For me, what broke that myth is again, going back to my mom's death, I know what depression looks like.
Yeah.
You know, I know what being suicidal looks like, you know, and I know what grief looks like if you go left or if you go right, you know. So the myth for me was theology and therapy has to coexist.
Come on.
You can't have one without the other.
Come on.
You know, especially in, you know, the Black and brown community, we're taught, oh, just go to God about it, pray about it, you know, and he'll deliver you from it. But God also, in the Bible, it talks about the Elijahs. It talks about the Jobs and being in mental anguish and despair. And so he's not amiss by that. But for me, they have to exist due to the chemical imbalance when it comes to the mental health side of things, you know, because there was times even after my husband passed away, there wasn't no amount of love, prayer, working it away. None of that could restore the depleted dopamine that caused the chemical imbalance that I was dealing with due to the trauma of experiencing it.
Yes.
So it's like you have to have both. So that chemical imbalance, that's where my therapist comes in. My therapist comes in a sense of, you gonna talk to me and I'm gonna help you unpack this, because 9 times out of 10, your friends and your family not gonna understand anyway.
Yes.
And I don't want to put that burden on them. I want my friends and my family to just be my friends and my family. I don't need them to help me unpack everything that's going on with me mentally. And that's where a lot of people, even with my friend group, my family group, if I'm trying to talk to them about something, before I even continue, I say, hey, do you have the mental space for it?
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to emotionally dump on you.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like they have to coexist. And God put scientists in this world for a reason.
Yeah.
He put therapists in this world for everybody has a gift.
Yeah.
And so those two have to coexist for me in order for full healing.
So I'm jump between two. So I'm gonna come back to this, what you just said. Shonda, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did.
Go ahead.
I wanted to piggyback on her on that because myself, being that all the trauma that I had went through, so the deaths that I've occurred in my life, yes, therapy and spiritual walking can coexist. Like she said, you cannot always mentally, you got that best friend, you got that spouse, you got that the family member. They are not clinically adapt to really help you unpack in those areas.
Right.
So you need those clinically. Even though me and my friends who are therapists, we all joke about it like therapists need therapists.
Yeah.
We all need somebody.
Yeah, 100%.
To unpack that in the right way, because if you're not unpacking it, you could continue to still bleed in that area.
Yeah.
If it makes sense.
Yeah, 100%.
Exactly.
Let me tell you, for me, the place where I discovered that therapy and theology had a relationship was when I hit so low of a place, and I went to my theology, and my theology said, go to a therapist.
Yep.
I kid you not, when I went to a therapist, this is going to sound weird, I had to ask God permission. Because I was so religious in the idea of it,
condition,
that it was like, God, what this man can do, this woman can do for me that you can't, right? So I struggled and I wrestled with the idea of going. So not trying to be like super religious, but I was like, I literally had to like pray, like, God, if this is what you want me to do, then the person that it ends up being is going to be right. Right? And I kid you not, I went looking. And as I looked, I found, but then when I found, God confirmed. Right? And so sometimes it's not making it too deep. Sometimes it's seeking God and then looking, right? Like, go and look for it. and make sure. It's a shameless plug, but it was a discussion that we had earlier, and I don't want it. It wasn't on recording, so I want to make sure that we plug it in here. When you go look for a therapist, or when God send you to look for a therapist, make sure it's somebody that aligns with your faith.
Come on.
Right? With your view. Right? Don't go in line with somebody who you already know you're gonna struggle applying or implementing what they telling you, because you like, we don't even believe in the same thing. Right? Because it's let me say it this way. They have about the same amount of therapists out there as they have flavors of soda. You know what I mean?
I'm struggling with my nutritionist because he want to send me all this stuff to say chickpeas and make this type of paste, and it's like, honey, I don't need that.
Yeah.
Give me a healthier version of what people like me eat.
Yeah.
Because that ain't gonna work.
That's not gonna get it. And so but it's understanding where they collide, where they intersect, but then also understanding that I could never put my therapist in a place where he was above my faith.
Absolutely.
They work together.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, my therapist can't tell me to go do something that's contradictory to the word of God. Right? Don't get me wrong. The Bible in James 5:16 says, therefore confess your sins to each other and pray, right, for each other.
Yes.
Why? Because I do need to be talking to somebody, and I'm talking to my therapist, but when I get through talking to my therapist, there is somebody in my life that God has already aligned and assigned me to, not only to talk about what I'm dealing with, but be able to talk with it, because the next part says, pray for us. So it's somebody that can pray with me, right?
Yeah.
So I kid you not, I was blessed, and anybody who knows me know this, so I ain't got to spread it, right? My mother is one of, if not the best friend I got, right? So when I'm fighting faith, I call my mom. My mom not going to just pray with me. My mom the type of mom who's like, okay, we fasting for 4 days?
Yeah.
All right, what we giving up?
Yeah.
Right? Like, she gonna do the journey
And she gonna
with
say,
me.
what? Okay, so what is exactly we praying for? Make sure you text it to me.
Right.
So we align it together.
And she gonna see it all the way through. She probably gonna do it better than you. I ain't even gonna hold you. My mom the type, she go walk, she do her daily walk. Her walking time is her conversation with God time. So she gonna talk to God 2-3 times a day. Well, that means if we fasting together, she talking to God about you 2-3 times a day. Why are you saying that? Because my therapy and my faith, they work together.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
My faith is keeping me spiritually in line, but my therapist, he making sure the screws don't come loose. You know?
Come on.
Making sure the screws don't come loose.
Come on.
Let me ask you a question. How did grief impact, challenge your role as a mom?
Oh man. This may sound odd, but grief was and in some ways still has been one of my biggest blessings.
Yeah.
In motherhood. And you know, a lot of people, what? But what I mean by that is, in grief, at the beginning, I didn't know how to pray for myself, because I had a beef with God.
Yeah.
I didn't understand. It was like my whole identity was, quote unquote, wrapped in being the best wife, being the best mother. But I was the type of wife that was the wife first.
Yeah.
Before I was a mother.
Yeah.
So it was like, you know, I followed the order, you know, that the order was supposed to be in. But the way that it became a blessing for me is because when I lost my husband, it was like, again, I lost half of me. That's like losing limbs and whatnot. So in that breaking down and having to rebuild, I didn't know how to pray for myself, but I know there's generational curses that I needed to break. There's certain things that needed to happen, and it was up to me at that point, because it was only me.
Yeah.
And if it was gonna be, it was up to me. And so I didn't fully understand where and how I needed to pray for myself, but I knew I needed to do it for my babies.
Yeah.
I knew I needed to be the first one through the wall for my babies. So I knew that I needed to get that mental fragility and that emotional regulation under control, if not for me, for them. You know, so in that, I learned certain things that I probably would have been resistant to in my healing, because I needed to learn that to be the foundation that my kids, the new foundation that I had to lay for my kids to build on.
Facts. Let me tell you why I can resonate with it. Again, we're trying to make sure that we hit the furthest to the right, but also the furthest to the left, right? I would say when I lost my grandparents, my initial approach to my grief was all wrong. Like, I'm not even gonna hold you. It was. I didn't want to go see him at the
Funeral home.
The visitation.
Okay.
I didn't want to do the funeral home thing. Then I like, all building up to it, I kept saying I got to be strong for my kids, because my kids had a real relationship with my grandmother and my grandfather, you know? And so it was like, okay, don't fall apart for the sake of my kids, right? But then I got to the funeral and I realized I was handling it all wrong. And I was like, okay, God. And I just started crying. And as much as that seemed out of place, it freed my daughter to have the emotion, right?
Yeah.
Like, sometimes I feel like we try to pretend and we try to encourage to have no emotion. But the problem with that is that the emotion is still present.
Right.
The question is how is this emotion gonna come out?
Right.
Am I going to ease it out, or is it going to erupt because I've been containing it?
Right.
And we teach our children not just in what we say,
Learn what we do,
but by what we do. So it's like, oh well, Mama didn't cry, so I don't cry.
Yeah.
Oh well.
And one of the things that, because I'm a part of a group, it's called SOS. It's a local group, but it's survivors of suicide. And one of the people mentioned there that when we have different emotions and we cry, because I struggled with truly breaking down in front of my kids in the beginning, but when we're laughing or when we're smiling or when we're happy, do we go in another room?
No.
And express those emotions? Do we hide those emotions from our kids? So it's like, it allowed me to be open to, if I'm crying, my kids can see that. As long as I'm not blubbering all over the place and uncontrollable, I need them to see those emotions, because then it lets them know that we have all of these emotions, and because
And
I'm
it's
not
safe.
it's safe, and I'm not. My goal is not to raise well-behaved children. My goal is to raise well-adjusted adults, because we're not gonna repeat the cycle.
Come on. Yeah, that was a good one. My daughter has seen me cry plenty. You know, I'm gonna say this, and I'm glad that he said that, because I want to say this. I don't think I cried as much as I cry to after therapy. I told my therapist he broke something. I was like, I don't know what you broke, but you need to fix it. And he's like, why? Because I didn't cry. Like, I'm not saying that there wasn't a hurt inside. That just, it never formulated like into a tear. Like, it didn't do that. And then I don't remember. I would tell you, I had my first therapy session, the first one. I wasn't on that session a good 10 to 15 minutes. And it was just running. It was running. I'm talking about uncontrollably. And I was so embarrassed. I'm like, I done got on this call with this man and I'm crying beyond control. But it was like a tub that you remember old school tub back in the day. You put a tub and they had that little rubber stopper you put on top of the tub, but then you pull a tub stopper and you hear, and that's the water. Like, that's what it was like. It was like all of this ugly cry. Yes, it's like all of this emotion just started coming out of me, and I was like, man, bro, like I have no way to put in words. Is this what's been bottled up all the time?
Yeah.
Is this what's been plugged up all of this time? And you know,
dealing with it.
No, and it was even more, if I be honest with you, it was more imprisoned, probably because I was a man and mentally looking at it from a very masculine man type of way. Like, my kids don't need to see me cry. They need to know I'm the man.
Right.
That is so garbage.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
It's
that
too
is-
much pressure for one person.
Right.
Like, come on.
Right.
I remember both of my grandparents died at the same time, one on opposite sides. It was the craziest thing. My grandmother was in hospice on my mom's side, so we're preparing for her to pass. And my grandfather on my father's side, he had heart issues, but you know what I'm saying? You ain't thinking that. You think, okay, he's okay. He got what he needed. He's back home. He's okay. And so he ended up going to a facility just to like check his heart stuff. And I'm on my way to go see my grandmother because everybody's like, okay, you know, she's in hospice. Let's make sure. We don't know how many days she got left, this type of thing. So I'm on my way to see her, and I get a call that said, my mom, I know I couldn't remember that she said is that they passed. So I'm thinking my grandmother, like I didn't make it in time. You know what I'm saying? To see her pass. And she was like, no, your grandfather. And I'm like, what? I'm like totally blown out of the water. And then the next day, my grandmother passes. So it ends up their funerals are on a Sunday and a Monday. So it's like back to back. I'm at funerals, and I there was no time to like adjust, adapt, or to settle in everything that was going on. And it was like, to this day, they're a blur. To this day, I can't really like pick apart the two. It just seems like one big funeral. It was like one big death just happened, and I don't remember all of the details because it was just too much. And then to like coming into the season I'm in now, I have two family members that are in the transitioning phase, right? And I remember crying. I was crying, and
I just woke up to tears. I didn't know what was going on. Who
I
I need to fight?
I was
What
like
happened?
crying and trying to come up with the words. And I made up in my mind that I was going to call my aunt every day because she lives so far away and I can't get to her. I was going to call her every day and just talk to her until I couldn't anymore. And it was just like, I called her that first day and it was a mess. It was like gathering myself or picking myself up. And then like she was trying to laugh and make jokes in between, and it's like, but you don't even know like the things that go down in my mind. But it was like I needed that moment, and then I needed that perspective of God to say, they don't belong to you. They don't belong to you. They belong to me, and that it's a celebration. I'm happy that I got to experience them. Happy and me to try to hold on to them and keep them here in the suffering would be selfish.
Right.
So I had to say, I'm okay with that. She kept saying, God promised me eternal life here or there. But he promised me eternal life. I was like, okay, you're right. Like, just to give clarity, she's battling cancer. And it's just, she's just decided. No chemo, no nothing. She just decided. God promised me eternal life. Whether it's here or there. And I had to be okay with that. I had to be okay with your choice. And that's hard.
That's very hard.
It's hard to be okay with somebody's choice because God gave us all choices. And that's okay. And my uncle, he's going home on hospice soon. I believe he was supposed to go home yesterday, but I don't know if he went home yesterday or today. I haven't just yet talked to my grandmother. He's just like, let me go. So it's kind of like you're in there with them, but you're like, these are the people that belong to me.
Mm-hmm.
These are my loved ones,
Yeah.
the ones who loved on me, the ones who I've run to, the ones who've covered me. Like I feel like they belong to me.
Yeah.
But God is like, they're not yours, they're mine.
And they've made a choice to release that control, and that's hard.
It's
to
hard.
accept.
It's hard.
What does legacy mean to you now after loss?
Whew. Legacy is that's a heavy word. That's a loaded word.
Yeah,
Legacy is a loaded word.
I know.
But
you got it.
I do. Legacy for me is one of my coaches. He always say, you know, what do you want people to see when they see you coming? You know, and for me, taking that a step further, like everything we are doing here is for the glory and honor of God.
Facts.
That part.
Yeah.
So yes, I can have financial legacy, leave a financial legacy. I teach it. Yes, I can, you know, build generational wealth. I teach it. Yes, I'm preparing my children, you know, all those things. But it's like, for me, it's about discipleship.
Mm-hmm.
It's about, because I look at myself as, when it comes to, I created this lineage for my babies.
Mm-hmm.
I am this is a matriarch right here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the matriarch, and what am I leaving behind?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I want what I'm pouring into them and what I'm teaching them through the guidance of God to be passed down to their kids and their kids. And I want it to all point back to God. You know, and with legacy, in a married sense, you know, our legacy was kind of one and the same. We wrote our goals every day together. We wrote our affirmations down together every day. You know, but there were certain things when two became one.
Facts.
And then that two became a literal one.
Yeah.
You know, again, it's like some things I had to let die because that part of the legacy had to die with him. Yeah. And I had to pick up what I knew that I could do within my own strength with God, and I formed a new thing. Like I said, figuring out a new way to do an old thing. There's some things that I still will accomplish that we set out together, but there's other things that had to die with him because that took two of us. Yeah. And so for me, I'm teaching in the realm of what I can, and I'm moving in that side.
Yeah, I feel that though. Because what you don't want to do is let that legacy of God and discipleship die with you. They gotta have something to live off of, to sustain off of. And I want to see my kids make it to heaven. You know what I'm saying? I may not know those are my children. Who knows what I'm gonna know when I get there? But I would want to have the faith now and stand in that and know that my kids' and their kids will be in heaven one day also. You know what I'm saying?
And they I want my grandbabies. I had a praying
grandmother. And we living off of her prayers right now.
You know, and one of the things that we taught them at a very young age, like my kids will say it, you know, your choices create your challenges. And, you know, even going into the schoolhouse every morning when I would drop them off, you know, I'm kind, I'm loved, I'm smart, I'm valuable, my choices create my challenges. Those are things, because if we don't speak into our children, you know, the world will speak into them.
That
part.
And they'll repeat it.
Exactly.
And unknowingly, it'll become an affirmation.
Exactly.
Because life and death is in the power of the tongue. And they'll just continue to confess, I'm not enough. I'm, you know, I don't have value.
Right.
You're right. 100%. 100%. Yeah. They never truly leave. They are still here in bits and pieces of us. I see my beloved grandmother in my mom's face, my aunt's face, uncles. I speak phrases that she said. They leave remnants of themselves. We just have to be aware enough to see it. God is so intentional and good.
100%.
And he is.
Amen.
I love, not only is he good, I love his intention. I love his intentions.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you a question. How did financial literacy become a part of your healing and ministry?
For me, it was because I had to rebuild from scratch all over again. You know, financial literacy the way that I frame everything, you know, with life insurance. We had life insurance, but we were 4 months shy of the suicide clause. So there was no $750,000 payout. I was left with what I had in my savings in return of premium, you know, and we still needed $12,000 to get from Pennsylvania back to Texas. Moving expenses, you know. So for me, it became my mission work because now I want to prevent other people from having to go through what I went through to rebuild, you know, and starting from the ground up. It's like, again, when I say you can't teach what you don't know and you can't lead where you don't go. So it's like, it's almost like if I touched that stove already and I told you it was hot, you know, so if let me prevent you from having to touch from burning yourself, you know. And so we always feel like we have more time, and we do until we don't.
That part.
You know, and so I use my story to highlight the downside of the lack of preparation. And I use that to move forward. And
you know what I found out to be difficult, because my sister, as we were sharing before this call, my sister had to deal with some of that, right? She lost her husband to suicide, but he had reached that part of the clause, right? So in that, there was some difficulty financially, because how she set it up was she had a trust for her child, and then she was very, you know, strategic in her financial planning, and so she didn't work for a while, and then so that she didn't have any income. And so then when you're trying to apply for different things, because, you know, if you set your funds up in a trust, you know, there's certain stipulations that come along with that,
It's
right?
red tape.
Right. So her trying to figure out how to get Medicaid and stuff for herself so she could be back to a sense of normal until she's healed enough to fully get employed,
Right.
It's a hard thing.
Right.
And it's like I think she's kind of like in that shift of things, and it's definitely hard. It's definitely confusing, and I think she's still trying to figure that part out. So it's kind of like, what do you do?
Yeah, and for me, you know, that happened with the policy side of things, but my husband was a full-time crane operator, and we had a real estate business on the side. So I went from collectively about $270,000 a year to now I'm at about $30,000. You know, so what, you know, and I'm having to start from scratch all over again and build it up. But one thing that will get you up and going is the fact that I lost it all. You know, I lost it all and then some. You know, so it's like when I rebuild it, I'm rebuilding it in authenticity. Like my mission is, you know, to shatter glass ceilings by walking authentically, by living authentically, embracing transparency, and unlocking the divine potential of every soul I encounter. You know, by doing that, I have to be authentic, and in that, I'm going to have to share the downsides of my story. I'm gonna have to share. There are some things that I still have to struggle with because I'm only 3 years out. You know, so it's not like I just turn the switch night and day, and now I'm this 7-figure, you know,
100%.
earner again. It's not like that. But when you have a plan in place, so when I help families with planning, then even if you're not where you want to be, I can show you what it looks like for you in a plan to get you to where you're going. So,
okay.
Let me tell you something. I want to go back to a comment that I think is valid, but I think it's even broader. Okay, it says Christians that lose a spouse need to be honest about their anger at God. He knows you are. He just wants you to say it.
Yeah.
I don't even think it's just in the loss of a spouse. I think when trials happen in your life and you upset, you angry, and you frustrated, you to be truthful with you, you need to say it. And God want to hear it.
Yeah.
Problem is, we've been taught what we were saying earlier. Don't question God, right? Watch how you talk to God. All of that's true. Like hold on. Not that don't question God. Watch how you talk to him. I get the concept there, right? Don't get on your knees and start cussing in your prayers. But I get that. But what I'm saying is, being angry and not acknowledging you angry doesn't change the fact that you angry.
And he knows it.
And your behavior changes.
Like you ain't hiding it from him. That's like your parents. They know when you mad. You stomp off and you go.
And when you look at God as, we call him our father, but when you look at God as like, if I could tell my natural human parent my feelings, then I'm going to be I need to be free to share that with God too. And I was ripping and running until 2023. And God sat me down and addressed my anger because at first I thought I was healing. In Valentine's Day, 2023, I ruptured my Achilles. Helping somebody push that car off to the side of the road. Ruptured my Achilles, had to have surgery and 6 months of therapy.
Girl.
Gotta sit you down.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
And I was like, God, you told me to stand on my 10, and then you took 5?
Yeah.
Like you said, you doing too much. You think it's you. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, that don't make sense.
Yeah, so he will address it. If you stagnant, he gonna address it.
Well, y'all heard me say earlier, I told God I was angry and didn't want to be mad no more. Next thing I know, I was
rolling under
pews and carrying on. And I'm talking about I was a stale-faced man. Went sit in church on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
I don't even know why they doing all that. You ain't that good.
But then
like I was really mad.
Yeah, yeah. And then you realize after you come out, it was like, oh, it's my bad. I was tripping.
Yeah.
I know you was covering me. You was watching out for me when I wasn't watching out for myself. Yeah. I was throwing a little tantrum.
James says he takes your 5, so you have to use his.
He's so missed.
Yes. All right.
But that's true.
All right. We got a couple of questions I gotta make happen because they're the definite, right? All right. Who is Courtney now, and how is she different from the woman before the loss?
Courtney now is more aware of self because I had to die to the old me. Yeah. So in that, I'm learning that no is a powerful sentence. And I'm learning to put myself first. I'm learning to put my healing first and understanding that you see the glory, but you don't know the story. So in order for me to continue to give God that glory, I have to move, like I said, authentically.
I might have to put that on a T-shirt. She said no is a powerful sentence.
No is a powerful sentence because we spread ourselves so thin in trying to, and I have this issue with some people that still expect me to be the old me, the person that they knew before life happened to me, before the rug was pulled from under me, and I'm having to reintroduce myself to those people. And in that, you'll lose some connections, but you don't lose people that are supposed to be in your life. Because the people that matter don't mind, and the people that mind don't matter. So it's like this Courtney is this is a season of me. 100%. This is a season of me. I'm going from his story to her story.
Baby, you kill it with them words. I ain't even gonna hold you. The people that mind don't matter, and the people that matter don't mind. I like that one. That was a good one. All right. I got a couple of questions, but I'm gonna try to swing it into 2. Okay. One question. When did you realize that your pain had purpose beyond just surviving?
I realized it when I had my first encounter with somebody that reached out to me that was having suicidal thoughts. Okay. And, and then it kind of changed into now this person has a family member. So when I started to become the go-to for that, I resisted because I didn't feel equipped. Yeah. But in that, in our journey, even if we don't feel qualified, he
don't change the cause.
Exactly.
Right.
It don't change the cause.
He qualifies the cause. So when I started to get those type of interactions, I was like, okay, I see you, God.
Yeah.
So this has to be me, because there's a difference between your calling and your purpose. Your calling is what's in your hand, but your purpose is what's in your heart. And so, that's when I realized that it had to kind of intertwine with each other.
Okay, and what do you hope faith communities like Yoked would learn from your story, and how can they do better in responding to mental health and loss?
What I'm hoping that people would learn is that there has to be a bridge between what we know of religion and what we know of the relationship that we can have with God, and the community that separates the two, because there's two different communities.
Yeah.
And I feel that spaces like this can be the spaces where, when Jesus went into the tabernacles and he threw the table, he flipped the tables because they weren't doing what they were supposed to do. I feel like that can be that synergy type of thing that can bridge the gap between the two, and it'll actually bring more people to God.
Yes. Yeah.
And as far as, what was your second question?
Where is it? Here it is. And how do they do better in responding to mental health and loss?
I believe in, if many believers would understand that suicide loss does not mean that that person is condemned to hell.
That part.
Come on.
Because it's nowhere in the Bible is it mentioned.
Yep.
And his salvation was not a result of his perfection.
Yeah.
It was a result of God's salvation. It was a result of salvation. And
Preach, Courtney.
I think that, even when we mention the things in the Bible, God understands mental anguish. He understands despair. Elijah talked about not wanting to be alive. David talked about, his own mental despair. Job cursed the day that he was born. So there's different things that shows us that he understands. Yeah. So if we can highlight those things, then we can understand that this has been happening since way back when.
Ain't no new trick under the sun.
It's nothing new. So if we can basically find me a scripture and point it out, and then we move forward from there, because everything is written.
Yeah.
It's all written. So if we can focus on what is written, then I think we can mend that gap.
Yes. All right. Now, like hit you with a curveball. Courtney, what is your career today? Like, what are you doing? and how does, tell us, how do they coincide with each other?
Okay, so my career is in financial services. I am an associate advisor, and what I do is I help families earn more income, become properly protected, debt-free, and financially independent. So I build complementary financial plans to help families get from where they are financially to where they want to be.
Nice.
Based on their goals, their dreams, their budget, their desires, helping with family plans, college savings plans for kids, life insurance, the whole works, and everything wrapped in financial services. And so again, that ties into my purpose.
Yeah. And so, I mean, really to do that, I mean, I know in the community, some of the communities that I've been in, even some of the communities that we've come out of, right? Financial literacy is like a really big conversation, right? And most people's interpretation of stewardship, literacy with their finances is inherited because it's taught. So if my mama was bad with money and my daddy was bad with money, I'm probably bad with money. And if my parents were good with money, I'm probably decent with money, but I could still be better with money, right? Our relationship with money oftentimes is based on
generational.
It's
generational, yeah. And when it comes to that, it's like, because we weren't taught finances in school. If anything, we found ourselves in debt right out of high school. And then there was no financial planning or representatives to actually show us how to get out of that hole we created. And so when it comes to generational things, it's like you can't seek advice. You can't break generational curses, seeking advice from the generation that's cursed.
Facts.
You know, so it's like the rooms that I'm in and the mentors that I have and the coaching that I have. You know, I have a little over 8 years of experience in this industry, but the coaches that I have brought so much meaning to my life because I know where they were and I know where they are now. And when you are in rooms with certain people, it's like I want to take that energy and I want to bring it back to my people.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's one way where I give that back, you know, because each one reach one, teach one.
Yeah.
And so that's what I want to do.
And so you're in these rooms, and it's, man, I don't know why God keeps bringing this up, because what you just said really just made it come up again. I think I mentioned it Sunday and Saturday. I got to know a person, and this particular man, he owned the food towns in the area. And man, I good man, like honest to God, good man. I got to know him through ministry. I was going through a trial and a tribulating of a moment, and Harvey had just hit Port Arthur, and I was still working here in Houston, and I was struggling because home was where my heart was, but Houston was where my job was, and I was struggling. And the church got behind me. They loaded up an 18-wheeler full of food, sent the 18-wheeler to Port Arthur. I stayed in Port Arthur probably a week, smoking briskets and doing the food thing, right? But me and him got a chance to talk on a more personal level one time, and he said to me, if you sit in a room, and in every room you in, you the 10, you're doing a disservice to yourself.
Come on. Because
every room you in, you the teacher, but you ain't learning nothing. And so what you want to do is you want to put yourself in a position where you're in the rooms where you're a 5, you're a 6. So you're giving and you're getting.
Exactly.
Right? I think so often we put ourselves in positions where we want to get, but we don't want to give. And then we got people who, they're givers and they want to give, but they struggle in receiving, right? But the true dynamic of growth is the capacity to deposit and withdraw.
Exactly.
Right? And so I'm saying all that to build up to this. I feel like just in the last 2 hours, I know y'all only got an hour and 13 minutes, but in the last 2 hours, there has been so much deposit and withdrawal, right?
Absolutely.
So much encouraging in understanding how to deal with not only ourselves when we're depressed or when we're grieving or when we're hurting, to give us the grit to keep going, but also when our friends and our family members are my assignment, because you realize sometimes you assign to people that ain't friend or family.
Come on.
My assignment, and God is telling me, be encouraging, show the love, show the light, live it, right? Sometimes that is so hard, but it's also so necessary.
Yeah.
And God, I don't want to be bound by the hard, but I want to live in the calling of the necessary, right? And so like even what you're doing right now, sitting on here, talking through what you've been through, giving God glory in the midst of it, right?
Yes.
But then also still, like, I don't know if you guys know this, but again, we got a chance to talk to her before this, but like so much of this is in her element and outside of her element at the same time. And when you can step out of your element on a calling, right, and do what God is calling you to do, we're just praying and believing that God is going to double-fold elevate you, right? Continue to put you in a place where your sound is making a noise for the sake of the kingdom, that your children continue to see a mom who has more fight in her. I'm gonna throw this little shameless plug. You know, she from PA, man. You know what I'm saying? So she from PA. So if there's one thing we can do is scrap, right? And so we know and so I say that to say is that you are a blessing.
You are.
Right? You are a living,
and you're stronger
walking
than you know.
blessing.
Thank you.
Man, you don't
I
even
said I wasn't gonna cry on this podcast now. Come on.
It's okay. You're stronger than you know, though. For real. It takes a lot of strength to do what you do. It's a lot of strength to do what you come through. It's a lot of strength to say it. I mean, we say all the time, it's not real unless we say it.
Right.
And it takes a lot of strength to do that. And I mean, I appreciate it. And don't nobody else do, which I know they do. I appreciate it. I appreciate the time that you've spent with me. I mean, it gives me, like I told you earlier, it gives me hope for my sister's situation. Like, she ain't healed, you know what I'm saying? And she's still trying.
Right.
And I mean, the situations are different. And, but it gives me hope in that. And like I told you, I told her I was going to send it. I was going to send it to her.
And my thing is, you know, in situations like that, it's like just keep stacking days.
Yeah.
Just keep stacking days. And, you know, with people that struggle loss like this, a lot of people don't know how to approach us.
Yeah.
And sometimes I just want somebody to not say nothing at all. Just come sit by me.
Yeah.
Or just say, hey, can I take the kids for ice cream?
Yeah.
And bring them back in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Because it's all on me for the most part,
Yeah.
you know, but it's like just those little things. Like, I don't need you to psychoanalyze me or, you know, try to fix me.
Yeah.
Because what a lot of people don't understand is if I could have fixed it, I would have fixed it already. You know, so it's
I gotta live with it. It's kind of like
I
think of my mind is going to blank, but when the thorn, when he had his thorn, right? Like, understand that there are some things that I'm gonna heal from, and there are some things that I gotta learn how to live
you gotta
with.
live with. And
right?
grief is one of those things. It's just your life becomes larger around it. You know, and that's in any type of grief. You know, grief is nothing more than love with no place to go.
Yeah.
And you just gotta find a new way to find somewhere for it to flow freely.
Yes.
So
man, I hope that you guys got something tonight. Before we wrap up, though, you know how we do it. We're gonna pray with you guys before we dismiss.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's so authentic, and that is it.
And very loving. Very loving, very kind.
And authenticity is genuinely what the world needs today. The world genuinely needs authenticity because, to be really honest with you, they've seen so much of our religion.
Yeah.
They've seen so much of our they've seen so much of our religion and our traditions. But the moment they start to see our authenticity, it is then that Christ gets an opportunity to really be who he is.
And, you know, that transparency breeds relatability, which breeds major reach. Each one reach one, teach one.
Yes.
So, yeah.
That's why even when you go back to the Bible, parables were so important because he was just trying to make it. He was just trying to make it. Let me get it on a level where you can just get to it, right? And that's kind of how our ministry and our outreach has to be.